Hey everyone. Before we get into today's episode, I want to just give you a heads up. This episode covers suicide directly and honestly. It's part of the story, and we felt it was important to tell it that way. If that's something you're not in a good place to hear right now, it's okay to come back to this one later, or don't. And if anything in this episode connects with you, something you're going through personally, don't forget the 988. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available 24 hours a day. Just call or text 988, and we'll be right here when you're ready. Okay, I want to start this one by saying something out loud before we get into the meat of it. This call stuck with me, not in a traumatic way. I processed it, I'm fine, but in the way that some calls just, I don't know, they stay in a drawer in your brain, and you open it every once in a while and think, that happened.
How long ago was this?
Long enough that I think I can talk about it clearly. And I want to talk about it clearly because I think that this guy what he was going through, right, deserves to be understood, not just described as some story that I tell.
That's a pretty good thesis statement for the whole episode.
Oh, I've been practicing. So, okay, here we go. A biochemist walks into a bar, except there is no bar. It's just a house and a decision he'd already made and some ricin.
And on that note, welcome back to John Teaches Sean About His Brain. I'm John.
And I'm Sean, and we're back with episode 2 of season 4. And I want to say up front, this is a different kind of episode than last week's.
Yes, it is. Last week was lighter with an emotional gut punch at the end, maybe. But this week is going to be
the other way around.
Yeah, we're going to start heavy, and I'm sure we'll get to some interesting and even humorous moments, but the foundation of this story is a person in real crisis, and so we're going to treat it that way.
Which I think is part of what this season 4, is all about, because for law enforcement calls aren't a genre, right? They're real things that happen to real people, and sometimes those people were dangerous, and sometimes they were tragic, and sometimes they were both at the same time.
And this one is both at the same time.
This one is very much both at the same time. So for anyone joining us, let me just recap. The format this season is I tell you about a call I went on during my time in law enforcement. And then John explains the psychology behind what was going on with the people involved. So for example, last week, I talked about a welfare check on a woman with a hoarding disorder. This week, I'm talking about a biochemist who lost all his money gambling and then made ricin at his home to end his life.
And if you just said, wait, what? Yes, all of that is one sentence. Let's go.
Okay. So the call comes in. I want to be careful about the details here, right? For privacy reasons. I never want to trample on that. But so I'm going to some specifics are going to just be general in nature, but the shape of this story is accurate, right? So the call comes in. It's another welfare check, similar to last week, actually. But someone close to this man called 911 and asked the police to go and check on him because he had been saying some things that were concerning to them. Not a specific threat, more like the way they described it was he had been saying goodbye, like the kind of goodbye that sounds like goodbye.
Yeah, and if you are close to somebody who's in crisis, you can pick up on what that goodbye means before it becomes explicit usually.
Yeah, you can, and they do. And in this case, they were right to be concerned, right? So my partner and I roll on the call, and, this was I just want to say that not a lights and sirens situation going in, right? We just drove to the location, but we didn't know exactly what we were walking into. And the concern was that he might harm himself, but we had nothing else to go on other than that.
So you're going into this relatively calm then?
Relatively calm. Yeah. I mean, you always treat the unknowns like there could be threats, but yeah, this is, we roll up and it's a nice house in a nice neighborhood. Nothing about the exterior says anything unusual is happening inside, right? So we knock on the door, and the male, as he was described to us, answers the door. So I think we are talking to the person that we're doing the welfare check. And at first, the thing I notice is he's completely composed. Like, I just remember unnervingly composed, very calm, very polite, and he invites us in.
That composure you're talking about, remind me to talk about that.
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
go ahead.
Because at the time it read to me as a positive sign. And so I want to hear what you say about that. I want to revisit that because I'm not going to say it's false to say that my defenses came down, but I did get a sense of he's not a threat to us right now. But he invites us in. We sit down in the living room, and I start the conversation the way you do. We're checking in, asking how he's doing, mentioning that someone who cares about him wanted to come make sure he was okay. And he looks at me and he says very calmly, "I appreciate you coming, but it's already done."
Oh,
Yeah. So that's the moment this call changes. I ask him what he means by that. And he explains, again, completely calm, like he's describing a project at work that, but he describes to us that he has synthesized a substance at home using components, using things he found in the house. And he had already ingested a small amount of it to test it, and that he intends to take the rest of it
so he told you that directly.
immediately. No hedging, no drama. He just told us. And I'm trying to do the job, right? I'm trying to stay calm. I'm trying to keep him talking, but internally, there are so many things happening at once because now this is not just a mental health call. This isn't just a welfare check. Now I'm thinking, is this a hazmat situation? Is this stuff in the air? Like I had all of things going through my head. This is a potential active poisoning now, and I still don't know what the substance is, by the way.
Hmm.
So I ask him what he's taking, and he tells us again calmly, precisely, almost like we're attendees at a conference and he's the keynote speaker. That, I mean, really just says he synthesized ricin. And now I'll tell you, I didn't know much. I think I had heard of it before, but I didn't know anything about it. But he said he synthesized ricin from castor beans at home in his kitchen
The castor beans that you can buy.
that you can buy. And here's where the biochemist part becomes very real, very fast, because he then explains in detail the process he used to make this happen. And I'm sitting across from this man nodding. At that moment, I don't know why, but I was just trying to keep the conversation going while my partner had already stood up and went to the front door, and he is quietly on the radio trying, calling for resources. He's trying to get the information out. And in my head, I'm thinking, I have no idea how exposed we are right now.
Because ricin.
Is extremely dangerous.
Mhm.
For anyone who doesn't know, ricin is a biological toxin, like I said, derived from castor beans. There is no antidote. So even a small amount, if properly prepared, maybe that's not the right terminology, but is introduced into the body, it's lethal. It's going to kill the person. And this man knew exactly what he was doing. He had the education and he had the skill to do it correctly.
Which is a horrifying sentence.
Yeah, it is. And the thing that was going through my head, I think in that moment, and this is the part I've thought about a lot since, is that this man was not irrational. He was not out of touch with reality. He was not impaired. He made a plan. He executed it methodically, and he was sitting across from me on the couch explaining it with complete clarity. And that was somehow harder to process than any of the chaotic calls that I've been on.
Because, like, he didn't present you an opening, a place to start, really.
Yeah. 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 There was no obvious opening. With someone who's in acute crisis, screaming, panicking, disassociated, all of the things that go with it, you have angles. So what we try to do is interrupt that state, right? And this man had no state to interrupt. He wasn't in a state. He had already arrived at his destination in his own mind.
So what happened next?
We keep him talking. I'm asking about himself, not about the ricin, not about what he's done, just about him. And that's when the story starts to come out. He had he was a biochemist. He had a good career. He was highly respected in his field. And then over the past few years, he had developed a gambling problem and he lost everything. I mean, according to him, everything: savings, retirement. The house that we were sitting in was being repossessed. His marriage had fallen apart. And he had
Hmm.
been carrying this in secret for years. And by the time anyone knew how bad it was all gone. There was nothing left.
He was at the end. He'd hit the end.
He'd hit what he experienced as the absolute end. And the thing he said that I think about, he said, I am a scientist. I approached this the same way I approach everything. He assessed the situation and identified the most efficient solution. And I remember like this was quite some time ago, over 20 years. And I thought this man's greatest strength became the thing that made this situation more dangerous.
Hmm.
I'm going to be just, I've been thinking about how I was going to talk about this. So I said in the beginning I was going to be general and it might be a little vague. And if it, drives people up a wall that I'm being vague, I'm sorry, but privacy again, right? So at this point, fire and EMS arrive and we explain the situation to them and they actually have the appropriate gear on. My partner and I do not, but they treat the house as a hazmat scene. And then they come in and they start treating him or trying to treat him. And the substance he had prepared was real and it was properly made. That much was confirmed. And ultimately, he unfortunately achieved his goal.
Hmm. That is tragic.
Good word, tragic. We did what we could to comfort him. And, but, the hazmat team arrived and took over the house. My partner and I actually got put into an ambulance and transported to the hospital. And that once we got to the hospital, they took everything off us. They took our uniforms, our vests, our gun belts, our guns. We were standing there, in our unders. And then we get taken to this section of the hospital. I don't even know what it's called, to be honest, but and they give us a Silkwood shower, just like the movie. Uh, and
That sounds that sounds kind of traumatizing for you, actually.
I'm not gonna lie, the experience was a little bit scary. Right at that point, I didn't know if we were going to get sick or worse. And then
Yeah.
the caution that the hospital staff exercised didn't help, right? Like, I know their protocols. I know they have to follow the rules. They have to
Hmm.
protect themselves and everybody else. But that did not help to alleviate my fears at all. So that's all done. We're cleaned up. We're found to be okay. And so my partner and I, we're sitting in hospital robes, waiting to be discharged. And that I couldn't stop thinking about the gap the gap between how smart this man was and how completely his brain had failed him in a completely like in a different direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that gap is really what I want to talk about.
Oh, good. Because I still don't fully understand it, John. How does someone this educated, this analytically capable, end up in this situation?
Yeah, well, I want to take a second before I answer that because I think it's worth acknowledging what you just described. So you sat across from a man who had, for his reasons, come to the conclusion and the decision to end his life. And he was calm and clear when he was explaining that to you, and you kept him talking, and that was really a good move, actually.
Well, I was just trying to do my job, but really I didn't know what else to do, and so I guess I was stalling.
Yeah, well, I mean, your job in that moment was incredibly hard. So, okay, let's talk about what's actually going on in the brain because there's two separate things that are happening here. There's the gambling addiction and what it does to the brain neurologically. And then there's the psychology side of it, of how someone intelligent and analytical can arrive at a decision like this to end their life. and they're connected in ways that I think will maybe help answer your question. So
Okay.
let's start with the gambling addiction first, because I think it's one of the most misunderstood addictions there is. When you when you ask somebody what they think about when they think about, somebody has an addiction, it's almost always substance abuse of some kind. Like there's alcohol involved, there's drugs. It's something that you physically take into your body that alters your brain chemistry in some way. And that's what they think addictions are, which that's true. Those are addictions.
Hmm.
But gambling doesn't have a substance in that same sense. And so for a long time, it was just like you're making a decision, like you're making a decision to put money down on something. And so for a long time, people thought of that as not really as an addiction, it's just kind of a lack of willpower. So it's a character flaw. Like if you're gambling, that's just a character flaw. If you wanted to stop, just stop. Like stop putting money down. It's just money, and you can see your bank account's draining. So just stop.
Willpower. Yeah. Which is how I probably would have thought about this topic before this.
Yeah, I mean, most people would. But the neuroscience is clear that gambling activates the part of the brain that is the reward system. So, like the dopamine system, we've talked about it
Hmm.
before. And those pathways that it excites, once those pathways are active and they start releasing dopamine and that feels really good, then you want to keep doing that. And so gambling acts really similarly in the brain in the same way that drugs react in the brain. So the anticipation of maybe I'll win can be even more rewarding than the win itself. And then so studies show that this is actually what happens when you see somebody placing a bet, they get more of a jolt of energy out of that than they do when they actually win it. So it's that anticipation and that I've got there's this possibility right here, and I think I'm going to do this that just creates that excitement. And then over time, the brain starts adapting to that because that feels good. That excitement starts to feel good. And so you adapt to that feeling the same way you adapt to a drug, where you need, with a drug, the first time you always chase the first high. So like you get high and then you're always trying to do that again and you never can quite reach it because now your system is adjusting to it. And so you take more and more and more, and the more you take, the less of a high you get. And it just creates this cycle that is really bad. And so does gambling, creates kind of that same cycle because you need that stimulation to get the response that your brain is really kind of trying to get is longing for, so that your baseline shifts. And then when you're not chasing that high, when you're not looking for the anticipation of a win, then the rest of life just feels like flat and boring. And yeah,
So it's not a moral failing.
no, it's not a moral failing. It's a neurological process that happens below the level of rational decision making. So we've talked before about the on channel and the back channel.
Mm.
So the on channel is what you're aware of. That's your rational decision making. And the back channel is the non-conscious brain. So these are things going on in the back channel that you don't have, you're not aware of, you don't really have control over in the sense of knowing what's happening where you can stop it. This is just how the brain works. And so that's why people who are addicted to gambling, that anticipation is why they bet on anything. I mean, it's crazy the things you can bet on now, but even when they're not at the casino betting, it could be like if you're at the grocery store with them, like I bet you $5 that lady stops at the apples and picks up an apple before she moves on. I mean, just anything like that you might be able. It's that thrill of being able to anticipate that. So I think this is the part where this connects to your story, is that the gambling addiction has one of the highest rates of financial devastation of any addiction. Because when you're talking about gambling, it's not like other drugs and alcohol, because the mechanism of the addiction is money. It's money itself. So you can't separate that substance from the behavior. So every bet is both the addiction acting out and the means to feed the addiction.
And then when the money runs out,
Yeah, the addiction doesn't. So you
hmm
run out of money, but you still have that addiction. So the brain still needs that dopamine hit. So then people borrow money because they need more money. So they ask friends for money. They lie about what they're doing with the money. Sometimes they'll steal from family and friends. They start selling things, liquidating things things they never thought they would touch, like their kids' college fund. It's like, I've got
Mm,
to get to it. And it's, you even see it in movies where you're going, no, don't like leave that there. Stop. You've gone far enough. Stop. But they can't. And since it's financial, the consequences are, extraordinarily visible. You can see them. They're concrete. Like you can
mhm.
sit there and watch your bank account drop. When you're doing drugs and alcohol, like if you're drinking a lot, you can't take a peek every day and see how bad your liver's getting. I mean, it's just like it's
Right.
happening, but you're not seeing it, but you can watch your bank account just drop. And then you can calculate the effect of your addiction down to the penny as you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So, which for a scientist who thinks analytically,
Yeah, it's for a scientist thinking that way, it can be devastating in really a specific way. So, with the analytical mind and you're balancing things all the time, you're trying to figure out what's happening, what cause and effects are. When you see the bank account numbers dropping, you can't unsee that once you've seen it. So it's really hard to rationalize that part of it away because you can see that it's gone. So every day that he would wake up knowing exactly what was gone that day. So here's where your question about the gap really comes in. So you
okay.
ask how someone that is intelligent can end up here, like how they can like hit the bottom, like this person did. If they're smart and they're intelligent, how do they do that? So I want to push back a little bit on the premise, not on your
Okay.
question,
Hmm.
but on the assumption that's embedded there, which is that intelligence protects against this type of thing.
You're saying it doesn't.
No, I'm saying that it doesn't. And in some ways, intelligence might even make it worse because intelligent people are often very good at coming up with reasons for why something is the way it is or why it should be a certain way. They're really good at rationalizing things. And if you get into a discussion with them, you can see that because they've got really good points to make and they're articulate. So that same analytical mind that can build the rationalization around something, that that mind that makes somebody a good scientist makes them also good at constructing all these various reasons why this bet is a little bit different than the others, and then why they can calculate the odds better than other people, and why this time they'll stop at the right moment. And just a side story: when I was in graduate school, one of my colleagues who was in the same program as I was, he came up to me one day and said, "I've cracked the code on blackjack." I said, "What code? What do you mean?" He said, "No, I figured it out. I have the mathematics. I figured it all out. It's an algorithm and I can beat the casinos now." I was like, "What?" And he said, "No, here." And he pulled out these yellow legal pad pieces of paper where he'd scratched all kinds of notes on it.
Mm,
And we were young scientists. We were trying to become scientists. So we were still in graduate school. So he knew that his if he tried this, his bias might influence it. So he said, "Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to the." And by the way, I was in graduate school at the University of Nevada, which is in Reno. So
okay.
there are casinos around
Yes.
everywhere. In grocery stores, you can gamble, and coffee shops everywhere. So he said, "I want you to go." Not that there's blackjack tables in grocery stores, but there's slot machines.
Slot
Anyway, he said,
machines.
"Go to the
Yeah.
casino, sit down at a blackjack table. I'm going to give you the money." And again, we're poor graduates. We're both married, and I have kids. He doesn't, but he gives me, I think it was $50. It might have been 20. I think it was $50. And I'm thinking, man, I could really use that $50. What if I just told him that it didn't work and kept them? No, I'm kidding. I didn't think that. But he said, "Go there and follow these steps. And then at the end of this list, just get up and walk away, whether you've won or lost, because I bet you're going to win." I was like, okay. And probably partly the reason I did it is because I thought, if he really did crack this code, then I might be in a movie someday. Like I have a role in a movie. So I'm gonna be the guy that goes with. So I have my piece of paper and I pull out, which I feel kind of stupid at the blackjack table, but I followed it. and I won a little bit of money. So I came back with like $58 or something out of the 50. And he wanted me to go like 3 times a week. And I think the first week, I think we won every day. And so now he's getting really excited, and I'm actually starting to believe in him a little bit. And then the next week, it was just loss, loss, loss. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, I see my flaw now." I was like,
Oh
"Do you
boy.
see these casinos, how big
Oh
they are? If there was a way to do it, I'm sure they would have figured it out." But anyway, that was kind of a digression, but
no,
it's
that's very pertinent to this discussion.
yeah, because you're thinking about, what is it? How can I rationalize this? How can I
Hmm.
do this? And then you're thinking if, he had the stop gaps in place, like once you start to lose, stop right here. So the brain can start running a justification program, what it's doing and why in parallel with the addiction, which, that can make these justifications even more convincing to somebody with,
Mm.
with a sharp mind like that.
He thought he could science his way out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Could science his way out. And when that failed, when the evidence became like undeniable, because now, I mean, it's something you can see, like my bank account's empty. So that
Hmm.
same analytical mind turned on him because the conclusion of rigorous self-assessment and, you know, people who are intelligent, it's hard for them not to be critical of themselves and their own behaviors too. So when he got to that point, it can be brutal at times. He would have done the accounting probably, and he probably would have seen exactly where he was. And then, the shame that that brought with it as well.
Mm. The shame thing. Yeah. Say more about shame.
Yeah. Okay. So shame is different from guilt, for example. So guilt is, yeah, that was me. I did something bad. I did something wrong. That was me. Like taking ownership of, yeah, that was my behavior.
Hmm.
Shame is a little bit different because shame is, oh, that it's not just that that was me, but that was me. Like I planned that. I did that. So now it's not that that act was bad. Like guilt is that act, that bad act, that was me. Shame is actually the bad part is me. So
Oh.
for someone who's built their identity around being competent and smart and rigorous with, a scientific mind, someone who solves problems, the loss of that identity to something as apparently irrational as gambling can be catastrophic. So the shame doesn't just say you lost money, it says you are not who you say you are because somebody smart and intelligent wouldn't have lost that money that way. They wouldn't have done those things and they wouldn't have justified it as they were doing it. So it says that my idea of who I am as a person has been false, and that can hurt even more. And I'm saying this in general. Obviously, I don't know this person, but these
Right.
are the kind of the
Right.
psychological traits of it.
Yeah. And so that out of all of this, you've, as always, said some really like mind blowing stuff to me. But the guilt and the shame thing is uh that's I don't know that we've talked about it before. Maybe we haven't, and I forgot. But guilt. It says I did something bad and I feel guilty about it. But shame is I am bad.
Mhm.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
And this guy, he had no one to tell, so he carried all of this alone.
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't tell anyone because again, this is so opposite of who he viewed himself as and who he wanted everybody to see him as. Like, I want people to see me as the smart scientist and the analytical mind. And somebody with a smart analytical mind would never lose all their money in gambling. So, and it's not just for smart people. It's kind of, universal with gambling addictions that secrecy is a huge part of this because you can't tell people what you're doing because then obviously they're going to say, stop, you have to stop doing that. So you don't want to stop because it's an addiction. And if you tell
Mm,
people, they're going to try to stop you. And then the shame makes it impossible to tell people even after you want to stop. Like you get to a point where it's going, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. But now it's not, I'm not necessarily afraid they're going to stop me. Now I'm too ashamed to tell them who I am and what I've done. So it becomes kind of that loop, that closed loop.
until the loop runs out of road.
Yeah, until it runs out of road. And then this is the part that I want to be careful about, but when someone arrives at a decision that they are going to end their life, it usually doesn't feel like giving up to them. Like if we think about a lot of times when people think about somebody who is going to end their life, you think like, why did they just give up on everything? And to the person, it's I think it's really rare that they feel like that they're giving up. Instead, they feel like they're solving a problem. Like, I've become a problem. I'm now dragging everybody down. All these things are happening that it's all because of me and I'm the problem. So the probably the smartest and best thing I can do is to end the problem, which that's not true, but that's the thinking behind it. And so it's much better if you don't, not just for the people around you, but then you can also be an inspiration to other people in struggles to say, I bounced back and I came up. So it's ending your life is really never the best solution or the the way to solve the problem. But it's maybe even more so for somebody with an analytical mind. The thinking is, I've assessed this situation. I've found that I'm the problem. I found a viable path forward. So this is the logical conclusion.
So I want to ask something about something you just said. And I don't think we've talked about this before, but we have talked about, like you brought up the back channel.
Mhm,
And hopefully I don't misrepresent this, but you can scold me if I do. But the back channel like runs for the most part. Most of what goes on in the back channel is survival related. I am built to
mhm,
survive.
mhm.
That's like number one is we have to survive. So what happens? How does that get? And maybe I'm not saying this right, but how does that get overridden in a situation like this?
Yeah, that's obviously you're not wired for that to be the solution.
Yeah.
So it takes the on channel going through a lot of struggle, a lot of trauma, a lot of struggle, a lot of you have to be at a really, really, really low point generally, and to come to that conclusion. And it's kind of your on channel overriding through sheer will, overriding your back channel, um, your back channel's wiring for survival to do what it takes to survive. You have to basically will yourself to overcome that, and that can be a real struggle for people. So sometimes, people struggle with that, and if you've been around somebody who has attempted suicide or talked about suicide, you know that there are struggles and they fight and they struggle with that. And at some point, if they all of a sudden are not struggling with that anymore, if they've come to a calm or a peace, that's usually not a good sign because that's usually when the willpower that they have, their on channel's will to make a decision has finally overcome the back channel's objections to it. And the back channel's fight to survive has finally been overcome. And that's when they're usually calm. And that's when they usually will attempt suicide.
So okay, because you said calm, and it reminded. Let's go back to kind of something you said in the beginning. You told me we were going to come back to this, but
Mhm,
hit when I was dealing with him from the front door all the way until the end of that call.
mhm.
I took his composure, him being calm, and the way he was presenting to me read as a positive sign.
Yeah. I mean,
And,
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
and so because calm seems like okay.
Yeah. Like things are probably okay here. And
Yes.
calm also means, well, now I can talk to them and they'll listen. And they're probably in the situation like this when they're about to end
Uh,
their life, once they're calm about it, is probably the least likely they'll ever be to listen to what you have to say to them, to try to rationalize out. It's like, say whatever you want, and I'll sit here and shake my head and go, "Yeah, okay," but, like, the decision's made. So it's
hmm.
it's really difficult at that point to talk them out of something. It's um, when they're struggling with it, and when you can see that they're struggling, that's usually you have a better chance at that point.
Hmm. Okay, so that is
And in this case, by the way, the decision had already been made. He'd already
mhm.
taken some of it,
Yeah. Yeah.
some of the ricin.
Yeah.
So that's yeah, I'm sure that the decision to him had felt rational,
Mm.
and that's what kind of the untreated suicidal depression does to cognition. What we're talking about helps the on channel kind of overcome the back channel, and it narrows the aperture down to what's possible to like where there's only just one door left. There's only one visible door that you can go through, and that's just to end it because that's what makes the most sense. I finally thought through all the options and narrowed everything down to where this is my last choice. And if there's just one door, now the decision is so much easier. I just need to walk through that door.
That reframes so many things that I've dealt with.
Mhm.
I was looking at it all wrong, actually.
Well, it's when you hear it and have it explained and think about it in the way we've been talking about it, then that information, that knowledge can kind of change what you notice about people and change what you notice about the situation. And then the other thing I want to say about it is something you did really well in that room is you kept him talking. And I know in this situation, it didn't matter because he had already ingested the ricin before you got there.
Mm.
But if he hadn't, if he had just made the decision to end his life, um, you keeping him talking was really important. And you asked him about himself. You didn't ask him about the crisis. You ask him about himself as a person, and that's really kind of the textbook crisis intervention steps that you should take. So when someone's arrived at that final fixed decision, the goal isn't to try to out argue their logic, especially if it's somebody who's smart. They already think they have their logic figured out.
Mhm.
So you can't really out argue that. The goal is to create some type of personal connection with them and then connect them to that moment in time that they're in and just try to kind of, it's just like with stress. When you start to breathe, the world starts to open up, like you take a step back and it's like when you what was the other example I was going to give? But when you're in a situation that looks like everything's closed down, if you take a moment to look, things will start to feel like they're opening back up. I know a lot of times in therapy, if people get really distraught, the therapist will say, "Let's just take a few moments to breathe and to look around the room," and that just grounds you. And it kind of opens up. Okay, I'm seeing more than just this one problem right now. So that's part of when you start talking to somebody about themselves and about maybe their job or their work or their family, and you connect them to that moment, then that can maybe create enough of a connection that their aperture starts to open up. So I said, they narrowed down to one door. Now it's opening up, and I see, oh, I've got other options as well. So you can't really out logic them, but maybe you
Mhm.
can just open it up where they can see more and just remind their brain that there are other people in the world who care about that person and kind of pull them back to that grounding.
Yeah, not only in combat, but the combat lesson for leaders is, to take a step back, take a deep breath, and look around.
Yeah.
Physically, like, if you do those things, I love that you use the word aperture, because and that's you're just opening up that
Mhm.
lens to see. You don't get sucked into tunnel vision and all that, but the other thing is, well, number 1, I didn't know that's what I was doing in this case, by the way,
Mhm. Well,
but
you were trained well. You followed your
yeah,
instincts, I guess.
yeah, yeah.
So, I also wanna say something else to anybody who's listening to this, who might be carrying something like this person was carrying, like the addiction, like debt, shame, or a secret that, that you're trying to hide that's too big for you to talk to anybody about. It probably the aperture, like you said, it narrows from the inside, and it probably feels really narrow. And so there are doors that aren't visible to you from where you're standing, doors that can help, and you just need to try to open up that aperture a little bit, and that's really, I mean, that's the neuroscience behind it, because by taking a moment and opening that up, you can start seeing things more clearly, you see that you have choices, it kind of takes that filter of the crisis off so that you can see more clearly and you're not making decisions based on that narrow aperture and that filter that's over it.
I have one more
Okay.
question for
Yeah,
you.
yeah, okay.
Ask. Um, okay, so got all of that, but and I know this is not an advice show. I don't want to turn it into to an advice show, but I have while you were talking about this, and this whole show, there's been something scratching at my brain, but I'm thinking about, again, I'm trying to be very general for privacy reasons, but um, there there was someone in my life that I believe had a gambling addiction. It was undiagnosed as far as I know.
Mhm.
But I'm not thinking about them I am, but I'm thinking about the person that they lived with, that they were married to.
Mm.
And so you had said, when you were describing some of the behaviors of a person who is addicted to gambling, one of them is like lying about where they're going and what they're doing.
Mhm.
Um, but then this person who's in a relationship. So I'm stumbling around just to ask the question. Like I wanted to ask you, and I'm not asking for you to give me or people advice, but someone who is living, who has a loved one or knows someone that has a gambling addiction and is not seeking help for it or any of those things. Like I'm just thinking about how I always felt so bad for the person who was
Yeah.
watching this happen.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
loved this person,
Mhm.
and they would ask, "Where are you going?" Or not in an intrusive way, just like, "Hey, where you at?" Or "Where were
Mhm.
you?" And they would lie about where they
Mhm.
were.
Lie about, yep.
And even to the point, again, I'm trying not to get into specifics, but to the point where, the spouse would drive to the casino and drive by and there's their car
Mhm.
at the casino when they weren't supposed to
Mm.
be at the casino. So maybe there is no answer, but like what do we do if there's someone who is married to or has someone in their life that has a gambling addiction?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first obvious answer is seek help, like professional help.
Yeah.
Go find professional help immediately, because it's not something that you can generally, like 99% of the time, it's not something you can handle on your own and you can figure out on your own. And your spouse who has the addiction is going to want you to just, let's just work it out. And that's just buying time so that they can continue their addiction. And it's, unfortunately, addictions like this, man, it's so difficult because, um, if it's a drug addiction, it's a little bit easier to try to eliminate access to it,
Mhm.
but gambling addictions, online now, you can gamble online. If you have a phone, if you have a computer, if it's just so much easier. Even if you just have a friend at work that you wanna start betting on stuff with, you can do it,
Yeah.
like, it's just so easy. It's not like you have to buy a product that's been made. You just have to have some money, and that's the hard part because you go find it wherever you can find it. And so, I think that, professional help is the first thing, and then the second thing is just to don't think of this as a character flaw like we were talking, like,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
if you start with the judgment part, it's gonna be extra hard. If you look at it as, if your spouse had diabetes, or, and couldn't eat sugar, that wouldn't be a value judgment. Think of it in the same way, like, it's like cancer or something else where this person isn't making the decisions to do what they're doing. And so I think taking that part off of it makes it easier to seek help, and it makes it easier to help your spouse probably. And a lot of it is the hard accountability stuff that just gets really difficult, but it's
Mm.
easier to do if there's no judgment there, because if you bring judgment in, then is so frustrating. You get so angry over it versus you're still going to get frustrated, but there's just a difference there. So that's a lot of rambling, probably not great advice like you were looking at, but I think the biggest one is seek professional help.
No, that was not
You need
rambling.
somebody to help. Yeah.
That is exactly what I was looking for because you just summed up everything. Obviously, seek help,
Hmm.
but that second one is the dopamine is a monster. When we're
It
talking about
really is.
addiction, it's so. But and as hard as it may be, what you just ended with right there is don't. The best thing you can do is don't come from a place of judgment. Understand
Hmm.
that this is actually uh, a neurological. This is how they're wired. And
Hmm.
just like I wouldn't, come at them in a certain way if someone had cancer.
Right.
Maybe not a direct analogy, but that's good advice, John. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you.
good. Good.
Yeah.
So I have the same question for you that I had last week, which is now that we've discussed this, does it change how you think about that call?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, okay. So last week you asked me this, and I said I would have mentioned resources differently, or I think that at the end of our discussion, I would have had a different conversation with the person. This one's different.
Hmm.
Uh, I think, I think I actually did okay in that room
You
on this
did, yeah.
call,
Hmm.
But not because I knew what I was doing psychologically. I didn't, but because something made me ask about him
Hmm.
and to try to connect with him instead of trying to outlogic him or to argue
Hmm.
him out of the decision. And knowing now that my instinct was right,
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
makes me feel like that call, we handled that call the best way we could.
Yeah, you really did. Yeah.
So what changes for me, I think, is how I think about the years before that call. All the
Hmm.
things that had happened to him, the addiction just quietly building, and then
Hmm.
the losses accumulating. You said shame. The shame,
Hmm.
locking the door on every exit now, and nobody knew.
Hmm.
And if they sensed something, even they didn't have a way in.
Yeah, that's the tragedy really of trying, shame-driven concealment where you're hiding things because by the time it does become visible to other people, it's already been going on for so long. It's so hard to deal with at that point.
Yeah. And I do keep coming back to what he said to me. He approached this the same way he approached everything in his life. And I think, before this conversation today, I heard that as kind of cold, well,
Mhm.
clinical.
Mhm.
And now I think it's just sad
Mhm.
because what he was really saying is that the only tool he trusted was the one that already failed him.
Yeah, that's a really precise way to put it.
You might be rubbing off on me, John.
Well, then my work here is complete.
Oh, not even close. We got a whole season to get through. Okay. Okay. So this is episode 2 of season 4. John, next week.
Uh, Next week, we get back into something a little bit lighter. Sean gets called on a domestic disturbance where somehow by the end of it, both parties have united against him personally. I can't imagine that happening to Sean, but that's the psychology of conflict. Sometimes there's trauma bonding, and why being the person trying to help sometimes makes you the enemy.
That one I have a lot of feelings about. So we'll see you then.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And if anything in this episode connected with something you're struggling with, there is a door. You just need to find it.